I told Pastor Roy that I had this some time ago, and he thought it would be timely to do it today. The program that I'm going to give you was written by Vera Mae Doty, who was a big inspiration to me many years ago in our CWF lesson, and it's my pleasure to share her program with you this morning. And it's about the stained glass windows in the sanctuary. The windows, always a delight every time you see them. Their amber glow, morning or evening, is such a thing of beauty. And she goes on to tell about all the names, and we'll start with this one and work our way around. The first window was Mr. and Mrs. Robert J. Clark. They lived their religion. They were the parents of Carrie Lee and Nellie Redinas, who were active members along with their families. The next window is Mr. and Mrs. H.J. Hansen. Mr. Hansen served as a deacon and also an elder of this church. Mrs. Hansen was the Ladies' Union president for some 20 years. She was very efficient and a very faithful worker. Neva Warren, who was the benefactor who left us a large sum of money to this church, was a member of the Hansen family. The Hansen were described in our 1965 history book as the salt of the earth, and it never lost its savor. The next window is J.P. Cochran and family. The design on the window is the bunch of grapes, and the purple is a lovely hue. This symbolizes the fruit of the Spirit. Mr. Cochran was a railroad man. His wife was a homemaker. Their daughter Fern was a loyal worker in Sunday school and junior endeavor. She married Elwood Nichols, the late Mike Nichols' oldest brother. I don't know half these people, but I hope some of you recognize some of these names. The next window after the grape one is Mabel Rasmus. And the emblem on this window is the Easter lily, signifying purity and beauty. So fitting, as she died suddenly while a schoolgirl, leaving her friends shocked and grieving. Their family lived just east of Lake City. The next window is for Sarah Ross, and it has the dove with the olive branch, which is certainly biblical and a beautiful emblem for this window. Miss Sarah Ross's name is here. She had personality plus. She was tall and stately and spoke with authority. You listened when she talked. The next window with the C and the E in it is for Christian Endeavor. This was a youth group and was organized in 1890, 106 years ago, which is actually 134 years ago because I did the math, so that can tell you how long ago that Vera wrote this. They met on Sunday evenings before church services and were expected to be in attendance at those services. Many members wore a pin with the CE as the emblem on this window. Many romances blossomed at Christian Endeavor meetings. The next window is, I think it's the next two windows, is the WRC and the GAR. The WRC was the Women's Relief Corps, and it was an organization related to the GAR, the Grand Army of the Republic. These windows honor Civil War veterans. The men who served during this time were recently honored by special services held at the Cottonwood and the Lake City cemeteries during the sesquicentennial celebration. So that's been a few years ago. Those who served in the Grand Army of the Republic were first honored with a memorial window in the church, which burned in 1926. At the dedication of the earlier church in 1896, the stained glass windows were covered and each window was unveiled. It was dedicated with appropriate words for persons whose names appeared on them. The WRC and the GAR windows were draped with a large American flag. As the flag was lowered, George Hutchinson tapped on a drum. Mr. J.M. Tolliver then spoke. He said, "I address you not as members of a church, but as American citizens and lovers of one country, one flag, and one common Father, our Father God." This window is in memory of the Grand Army of the Republic, both living and dead, and who soon will be the memory of the dead only. On behalf of the Grand Army, I say we accept your memorial. To you who are younger, to your generation who have done the best we could must turn over the entire care of this republic. We hand down to you to such a republic as was handed down to us, but a land of liberty and religious freedom, separate church and state. See to it well. May you ever rejoice and sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside let freedom ring. History has said a great deal about forefathers, but little was written about foremothers. No man has ever showed a higher, nobler character than did a noted general of the late war, a member of the Grand Army and a member of the Church of Christ organization, the late President Garfield. When immediately after taking oath of the office of President of the United States, he knelt and kissed his mother. History is given liberally on its pages to the names of Grant, Sherman, Sheridan, but they were also sons of such noble, loving Christian women as your mother and mine. In 1927, at the dedication of this building, this window was unveiled as a memorial to these patriotic Americans. Mr. and Mrs. W.L. Gist. That's the back one there, with the cross and the crown. Mr. Gist was a quiet man during his part in a quiet and unassuming way. He was a deacon and an elder for many years. Mrs. Gist was a cheerful person. It is said she could see the funny side to most any situation. Mrs. Gist was one of the first to start plans to purchase the present parsonage. Mr. and Mrs. Gist were Ethel Mould's Mrs. Jessie's parents. The next window is the Loyal Bereans. The Bible is the symbol found on this window, and for many years this group met every Sunday morning to study and live the teachings of this holy book. Mrs. Nellie Campbell was a faithful teacher. The next window is CWBM, and that stands for Christian Women's Board and Missions. The women of our church were the first to become mission-minded. Through the local missionary society, they supported the work of Christian Women's Board of Missions. The first women's organization was the Ladies' Aid Society. Mrs. L.A. Hotchkiss was president. She was the daughter of David Parker, a charter member, and turned the first spadeful of sod for the erection of the church in 1882. A few years later, this group became the Ladies' Union. Then in 1943, the name was changed to the Women's Council. In 1950, the council again moved to keep in step with all the women's organizations in the Church of Christ, and they changed the name to the Christian Women's Fellowship, which we have now changed again to WOW, Women of Woodlawn. The next window is Mr. and Mrs. John Fitch. They were strong, character-wielding, enduring influence on the policies of Woodlawn. They had the courage of their convictions and stood firm on any and every issue they considered right. They opened their lovely country home to many church activities, and many social events were enjoyed at the Fitches. Mrs. Fitch was the church clerk for many years, and records were absolutely correct during her time in office. No business in the Christian Board of Missions was undertaken without her approval, as her judgment was never questioned. The Fitches were certainly pillars of the church. The next window is Mr. and Mrs. David Parker. David Parker and his wife Elizabeth came to Lake City from Ohio. He was a charter member and was one of the first elders. He was a singer and enjoyed singing praises to the Lord. The Parkers had a large family, three of whom I will name: Lucretia Hotchkiss, Rebecca Cole, and Darius, also known as Rye. These three were very active members of the church, which really pleased their parents. The next window is Mr. and Mrs. James Ensel. He served as Reverend. He was a minister here, but the window does say Mr. and Mrs., I guess. But he served two pastorates in Lake City. Reverend Ensel had the service of marriage for his daughter Anna, who married Dr. W.D. McCrary at Woodlawn in 1890. Dr. Ashton McCrary is their grandson. The next window, which would be right behind the organ, is Maddie Ronfeld, the granddaughter of charter member David Parker, a member of the Loyal Berean class, and a good Christian homemaker. She loved the church that her mother, Rebecca Cole, was so much a part of. She shared many bouquets of her garden flowers with Sunday congregations. Then the other one right behind the organ is Lida Daisy, a dedicated Christian mother who was held in high esteem by members of the church. She was born in 1859 and lived to be 91 years old. Dorothy Hocking was her granddaughter. And then the last one, which is behind the piano, is Mr. and Mrs. A.M. Short. Two very special people some of us have had the privilege to know and love over the years. Mr. Short was the most deserving elder, a person highly respected, and known as a man who loved his family, his community, and most of all, his church and his God. He served as a janitor here for many years. Mrs. Short, our ever-faithful organist and pianist, always ready to encourage others, her poems and writings enjoyed by so many. The little songs she wrote for special occasions, the many children with whom she shared her faith on Sunday mornings teaching Sunday school. She was a fine Christian woman who seemed to always have a song in her heart. Their daughter Evelyn and family continued the tradition established by her parents of service dedicated to Woodlawn. And the one window that isn't mentioned because Vera Mae passed away before, this one was named after Evelyn and Darrell Johnson, who we all knew and loved. These people and groups which have been so important in the life and growth of Woodlawn deserve our thanks and gratitude, and our promise to do our best to continue now and in the future to serve the Lord.